Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Before Las Vegas had the Raiders, the Golden Knights, or the Aces, the most Vegas-y sport of all was the Ultimate Fighting Championship. UFC has only grown over the past 30 years into not just a sports phenomenon, but a cultural one too. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with UFC icon Chael Sonnen. Chael's epic battle with Anderson Silva for the UFC Middleweight Championship back in 2010 is being inducted into the fight wing of the Hall of Fame ceremonies this weekend at T-Mobile Arena. We asked Chael about that fight and his always hot takes on how UFC has taken off from its home base in Las Vegas. It's Wednesday, June 26th. I'm David Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Hey, Chael, before we get into this conversation, I need a quick disclaimer. Everyone knows I'm a lawyer. I've helped you out with some legal stuff in the past. We're obviously not going to be talking about any of that. So let me just jump right into it. UFC has been around now for 30 years. What do you think were the biggest flashpoints of its evolution? And we can narrow it down to like 3 moments that really changed the game.
I love that you're asking me that, but I would like to get your take as well as somebody from Las Vegas. Like where I'm sitting, I see Dana White, or I'm pulling down the road. I don't know what your road's called there in Vegas, and I see the building. It's got UFC on the side of it, and I literally
the complex, the huge complex off the freeway.
God. But this is a street kid from Boston. This is a street kid who allegedly has a high school education. Like, I don't challenge that, but it's not even claimed of anything else. And I see that building, and I just thinking, if that were me and I'm pulling down the road and my mom is in the car, how proud she's gonna be. I mean, it was banned in 48 states, and now all of a sudden, not only is it legal in all the states, the biggest lawmaker of the world, which was the president number 45, and that's not a political statement, it's just a fact, was coming to the events. Like, it went from politicians and senators who are saying, you can't even do this.
It went from backyard brawls to totally legit.
Isn't that amazing, though? I used to be in Paris, David. I go get my hair cut, and, you know, the gal makes conversation with you. I would never tell them I'm in the UFC, because first off, they didn't know what it meant. And then even as I tried to explain, I go, so it's wrestling, or it's boxing, or like, it was embarrassing. I'm so proud of it inside, but nobody knew what it was, and I used to just hide from it. And I'm just sharing, like, that wasn't that long ago.
Right. And Dana White, we claim him as one of our own. He went to Bishop Gorman High School here. Famously, he has said in many interviews he got kicked out twice. But he came back, and he had this dream. He hooked up with Lorenzo Fertitta, who he also went to Bishop Gorman High School. And they kind of made this magic from, you know, really just a lot of brawling. So I guess I got to go back to that question, though. It has changed. It has become so ingrained in our society. What do you think have been the big flashpoints?
Okay, so the biggest one when it happened was getting a deal with Fox. That is now to ESPN, and that'll be a little bit of a hot potato. Like the business side of that will change. But when it got accepted by Fox, that's when people, Jim Rome was very big at the time. I think he's still big now. Dan Levitard was very big at the time. I think he still is now. But I remember both of those guys as sports commentators saying, okay, this is no longer a fringe sport. This is now mainstream. And they're now, and that was 2012 for perspective, but now here we are, and the Olympic Games are coming to America, back to Los Angeles in 2028. There is nothing in history to add validity to a sport like being accepted into the Olympic Games.
Fair.
They're not going to get it, but they're discussing it. They have meetings with the IOC. They're looking at buildings. They're going to call it pancration. We chose to call it mixed martial arts, but that was just to get a bill passed through the Nevada State Legislature in 2001. The sport would be the same. And I just share that with you. Like, I look at myself that was embarrassed to do it because, the barber call it human cockfighting or something like this. And now it's being looked at for amateurs. It's being looked at for kids in high school and of that sort of age through the Olympic process. And it's an incredible thing. And there's an old expression, the truth will set you free, but there was so much honesty about our sport. And then the product itself, Dana, if I was just to quote him, but he claims that that's why he can get in all the different countries, because it's a language, you could watch it on mute. Everybody understands the language of fighting. I think he makes a fair point.
Yeah, there were so many terms, too. Like when the octagon came part of, the common vernacular, it just had this idea that two men going, it's the Mad Max thing, right? It's just absolutely bonkers, and yet it is a sanctioned sport in Nevada and now everywhere else.
And David, by the way, now that we do have 30 years, like it's kind of a guess at one point, hey, I think this is safer than boxing. And then they would lay out why. Like, sure, we'll concede that boxing has bigger gloves, but in our sport, if you go down, you're not allowed to get back up. Like there was all these arguments. But now you've got the data and you've got a lot of things to support the safety of it. Look, I like what Dana said, that we can all agree it's not good for you. But as far as keeping people protected or people thinking that it was a blood sport or something, we've definitely beat that narrative. And it does deserve, like those athletes work really hard. Randy Couture was kind of the first. Randy came along as an Olympic alternate athlete, an NCAA All-American for Oklahoma State, and showed that you could take this real serious. Like, for example, this was a foreign concept, David, at the time. You could focus on your diet. You could get enough sleep at night. You could sit down with coaches and game plan. Like, those terms didn't even game plan, as simple as that is for vernacular, didn't even exist in this sport in the 90s. I mean, you want to talk about something that's come a long way in 30 years? Think about that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of the big names. I mean, I think a lot of people can rattle off names, yourself included. Our newsletter editor, Rob Katchel-Reese, he says, quote, combat sports have traditionally been sold on the aura and personality of the competitors, but it looks like UFC now makes the same money for every pay-per-view, regardless of who's inside the octagon. Do you think that's true? Are we leaving behind the golden era of personality-driven spectaculars?
I would think that is an inaccurate statement. Yeah, there's still bonuses and there's still incentives, and a lot of that is very private, but not all of it. Don't forget, the only sport in the world, aside from communist regimes, that is regulated by the government is combat. You've got boxing and MMA. But because of that, there's a 6% tax and there is certain information that is public. And no, it's still very much star-driven. Like, you're not guaranteed to sell out. There's a lot of bells and whistles that have to come with it. And there's very much different numbers. And I have a feeling that where that article came from was just the rights buy that ESPN did. But there is very much incentives to have big stars.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. Or, as I can say now, thanks to a few weeks with Babbel, hola, soy David Plotz, el jefe de CityCast. What if in 2024 you've got a little bit better every day? When you're learning a new language with Babbel, that's exactly what you're doing. And if Babbel can help me start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks, imagine what you could do in a full year. I got started with Babbel because I realized that my girlfriend, who's a native Spanish speaker, and my son, who's in AP Spanish, were conspiring against me, or I thought they were conspiring against me in Spanish. I wanted to know what they were talking about. And now, thanks to literally just a few weeks of Babbel, I'm starting to be able to eavesdrop. It is rare that something so fun and simple, and Babbel is super fun and very simple, is also so useful. So here's a special limited time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Many of us have those stubborn pounds that seem impossible to lose, no matter how good we eat or how hard we work out. My solution is PlushCare. PlushCare is a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. They can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound for those who qualify. Plus, they accept most insurance plans. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weightloss. That's plushcare.com/weightloss.
Well, Chael, I want to switch gears a little bit. We've got a lot of sports here in our city. Las Vegas is now definitely a sports mecca. How important is Las Vegas in the universe of UFC still?
It's the capital. There's only a couple of states that even claimed, and it's false claim, but that have claimed to be the fight capital of the world. California does a great job. Texas has made the claim. In New Jersey has a good reason to do it. When the sport was first legalized, it was first done in Nevada and second in New Jersey. So those were kind of the leaders. But no, Vegas is the place to go. Like if I could fight I'm from Westland, Oregon. As cool as that would be to fight at home, if I could fight at home or I could fight in Vegas, I would choose Vegas every time.
Wow.
Yeah, like that is the place to be. And a lot of it is just accessibility. I fought at the MGM a couple of times, but when you check in, you never had to leave. I could walk all the way to the fight. I could walk back to my room and either celebrate or, nurse myself, whatever it was.
A lot of athletes talk about the distraction of Las Vegas when they play here. What do you think about that?
Well, hey, there's some guys. I mean, there's some guys that get allured to it. I like that myself. I love the energy of Las Vegas. My wife and I love to go there, and a great night for us is to stay in with room service and watch a movie. But the fact that I can see the lights, like the fact that if I wanted to go downstairs at 3 a.m., I could, it's fun for me. It's not everybody's kind of town. Can I ask you something, by the way?
Always.
Thank you. There is a lawsuit. There has been and it was the UFC and a class action. To my understanding, it has been resolved. And then I heard from somebody on the side of the class action that said, no, the judge has rejected the offer. Even though everybody agreed, the judge said no and sent them back to go and renegotiate. What do I have right there?
Right. So let me explain it really quick, is that there was a class action suit. Some former fighters had sued the UFC for basically having a monopoly on mixed martial arts and not paying a fair amount to them. I think that the judge, at least what's come out so far, is that the judge thinks that maybe the settlement amount wasn't high enough, that the fighters didn't make a good enough deal, which is really super interesting. But let me switch it on you a little bit. I mean, do you think fighters have gotten fairly paid over the years?
Yes. I resented the notion that there was something underhanded. Before the government, by the way, people would come in and it was like a tent situation. They'd pull in, they'd throw the tent up, they'd pop the popcorn, they'd set up the ring. The promoter would be halfway down the highway before the guys were even showered up. Nobody would get paid. And it was one of the reasons.
The old bare knuckle brawls, right?
Yes, for sure. And, they would change the time of the rounds and there was no weigh-ins. Or the whole thing was really weird. These guys got taken advantage of. And all of a sudden you have surety bonds, and you have a commission, and things start to get done right. So I tell you that because when you have something with that kind of a history, and all of a sudden you have a guy like Dana White that not only is going to pay you what he said he's going to pay you, he's going to pay you when he said he's going to pay it to you. And so you understand how this works. We get out of the ring, we go right into the back where the cameras don't see it. But before we ever get to the locker room, we have our money. Just so you understand that. Like, that's a literal statement. As soon as you come behind the curtain, you have your money. Sign here. But that's totally refreshing. Like, in what walk of life is that true?
That's cool, but I think that the big issue is the amount of money. I mean, especially compared to some of the high-profile people in other pro sports that maybe the fighters were being taken advantage of. You don't
that's always been the argument. That's always been the argument. And it's not a false one. It's just like a misunderstanding of the business model. Like, let me give you a great example. When I got into the UFC, I could not believe how much I was making. I got $2,000 to show up and another $2,000 if I would win. And then my next fight was $5,000 to show and another $5,000 to win. Now, I debuted in 2006. That was minimum pay at that time. But so you understand, minimum pay today is $12,000 and $12,000. 6 times. I don't care if it's McDonald's or Nike or Exxon. You cannot find me a company that on its own is paying 6 times in 2024 what it paid in 2006. And that's little. That could be your brother's barber shop around the corner. If I may explain the problem with the math. So you go in, you're never going to get money in a guy right out of the gate. You've got to invest in him, and there's a formula and how you're going to get a return on your investment. Then of the 700 guys you got, only 8 of them are keeping the lights on. That's fine, and that's the business, and it's very risky. But let's say you go into that. So now you're a promoter where you sign a guy and you got to give him 3 fights in a year. You got to send him checks 3 times a year. So it's very risky. Now, let's say that you can honor it, even if it sent you $40 million in the hole like it did with the UFC, and all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, you get a deal with Fox. And it brings in $1 billion, but that was never considered when you sign these guys to contracts. What are you supposed to do? You want to make them right, but you already have these deals in place, so you move forward with business. And you want to know what the UFC did? They could have pocketed it. They would have had every right. They went in and paid bonuses. They're known in our industry as locker room bonuses, but money that you never talked about and you were never owed, and they just bring it to you. They will literally, you will open your mail one day.
What kind of bonuses are we talking about, Joe?
If you're a main event, the standard, if you were a main event, was $250,000. If you were a co-main event, regardless, it didn't matter the result, winner or loser. If you were in the main event, $250,000. If you were in the co-main event, $50,000 as a bonus. Then all of a sudden you had sponsorships. Dana never knew when he started this that he was going to have sponsorships that were going to out. He thought he was in the live gate and pay-per-view business.
Well, Chael, I want to focus for a second on the upcoming big Hall of Fame weekend. Your first bout with Anderson Silva is being inducted into the fight wing. Tell me what you recall about why that fight has just remains so special to so many people.
You know, that is so flattering to hear. Thank you for presenting it that way. I just fought Anderson a week ago. By the way, I went to Brazil and we had a boxing match, and I bring that up because I did not know that people enjoyed that rivalry. I didn't know that that was one for the ages, if you will, or one of the great rivalries in sport. It was for me. Like in my lifetime of sport and my lifetime of pursuit, that is where I put my effort. And it was one of those situations that was very difficult for me because my crowning moment is when I lost. It was one of these very tough spots. Even to go into the Hall of Fame and to be recognized, that's such an honor. But I'm being recognized for a match that I lost, but I lost by less than I was perceived to have lost by. Like, it was kind of a weird spot for me.
Well, let me set up the stage for people who aren't familiar with that fight. You were the underdog. Anderson Silva was in there. This was a title fight for middleweight champ of UFC. A lot of people had counted you out, but you were definitely talking the talk that you were going to prevail here, right? It got hard. And then all of a sudden, right out of the opening gate, you were aggressive and you controlled that fight. And by all accounts, you controlled the fight against, the champ for 4.5 rounds of the 5 rounds. And the commentators at the time were like, this is the miracle. This is going to happen. And then in the last 2 minutes, there was a little twist. What was that twist?
Yes. It's called a triangle choke, and it's a submission. And it is one of the most basic positions. Like if you were to go into a jiu-jitsu class, it literally could be what you learned on your first day. But it's the basics that win championships, right? It's one of these spots where it was so basic, it was almost a surprise that he went for it. Like it had no chance of landing, which is kind of why it landed. It was one of those things. I was in the 5th round. David, here's my great excuse. Everybody's got one. I was in the 5th round, but I had never been in a 5th round before. So this is the most tired I've ever been on my time on this earth. And I'm
going to add in, you're completely bloodied. You have been controlling this fight, but your gas tank, you're way past it.
Yes. Very well said. Like I have never been to this level of exhaustion, but to explain that, I've never been in the 5th round of a fight. You only have those in world title fights. And this is my 2nd world title fight. But the first one ended up getting stopped. And however it goes, this is the first time in the 5th round. And my corner tells me before I go out there that it's the 4th round. Now, I don't care. I'm not blaming them, but they were mic'd up, and so this gets put on Sports Center. So then the corner was mad at me. Like, hey, what are you doing telling people it's my fault? It's like, you told me it was the 4th round, and you got caught by ESPN. Like, what do you want me to do about it? How did you not know the round, by the way? And there is a time in a fight where you no longer have to beat the guy. You just got to run out the clock. And I don't know what I would have done if I would have known. Like, I don't know. When the barn was in sight, I don't know. I don't know if I could have stalled or moved away. Like in wrestling, there's a lot of ways to eat up time. It's a little harder in fighting, but I don't know if I ever would have been in that position. I did think it was the 4th round.
There was some controversy whether or not you actually had tapped or not tapped out, because that's what ended the fight.
Yes.
You've cleared that up in the past. It was a tap?
Oh, yeah. And that was created by somebody else, or maybe like the camera angle couldn't see it, and one of the commentators said it, but it was never me. I definitely tapped.
Well, let me ask you this. How did this legendary fight change your life or your perspective on the sport or otherwise?
Sure. Well, so I ushered in, and it's one of my things to create credit, but let me punch my own ticket because it's a part of the sport's history. I ushered in what's known as the entertainment era. And that was not a thing. As a matter of fact, what's now known as the entertainment era would have been viewed as bad sportsmanship. Like, that would have been bad form in a sport that's a martial art. You're supposed to bow to your opponent and things like this. And,
I mean, he did. Anderson Silva, at the end of that fight, laid down at your feet and bowed his head to you in what seemed to be a sign of respect. Did you take it that way?
Yes, I did. He was very sweet about the whole thing. He really was. I just didn't get at that time, like, what that had meant for the industry or, what that meant for people. People did not like me. When I walked out that night, they did not like me. And somewhere within that fight, they were all chanting Sonnen. It was just one of those things where I never changed over the time, but the crowd did. The crowd finally went, hey, I like something about this. Or maybe they were entertained or something along these lines. But it was enough, David. I went to Brazil last week. I had no idea. This fight meant a lot to me, but I didn't know that it did to our industry. We had a face-off, Anderson and I, on a Wednesday night, which, by the way, was Brazil's Valentine's Day at 11 p.m. Like, nothing could have been more inconvenient about this in a parking lot. 1,000 people came just to watch us walk on a stage and face off. And I'm only telling you that because I was just very flattered. I really did not understand that it was a rivalry that the world remembered.
Hey, Chael, UFC 303 is coming up. What are you looking most forward to at this event happening on June 29th at our own T-Mobile Arena?
Oh, David. So it's International Fight Weekend for one. Like, it's an entire week. We've got an expo. We got a Hall of Fame. You got a Joe Rogan show put in there somewhere. They got a slap contest that Paige Van Zandt. It's a whole week of entertainment. And it was to be capped off with the sport's biggest star, Conor McGregor. And Conor ended up getting hurt. Or he's claiming that he was hurt while he's in rehab.
The famous pinky pullout.
Yeah.
Pinky gate.
I was stunned. I was actually stunned because he's such a tough guy. Like, I was really stunned that he went with my pinky toe. But fair enough, here we are. And there's another fight that got added that I believe is what Ariel Helwani would refer to as the people's main event, but it's Brian Ortega versus Lopez. It's at 155 pounds. I think it could be the #1 contenders match, particularly if Ortega wins. I would not be surprised if he went right into Islam for the title next. For me, I'm very excited about that.
Well, Chael Sonnen, thanks so much for being here today on CityCast Las Vegas.
By the way, I got to tell you, Figler, you're a bit of a natural. You got a great voice, and I'm not just saying that. See you, buddy.
Appreciate you, man. And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, and how the hell did you not enjoy the show, why not call a friend, tell them about the show, rate the show too, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.